I recently dropped 15 pounds in just 6 weeks. And in today's video, I'm going to show you exactly how I did it and how you can do it too. Because you see, a lot of people want fast results, but they don't actually understand, one, how to get fast results, and two, the best way to get those fast results. So I'm going to break it down and make it real simple so you know how, and you can make sure you're successful with your fat loss. Now, before I get straight into it, let me just set the scene a little bit. This was me beforehand. Now, if you don't know, I recently just got back home. I've been traveling a little bit. Things have been a little bit stressful, so my training hadn't been consistent. I wasn't really being aware of what I was eating, how much I was eating. Everything was pretty relaxed. Now that's fine, that's okay, but just in terms of my preference and what I like, I lost a little bit of control, gained a few pounds, didn't really have as much control over how I looked as I would like. This was me after the 6 weeks. Now, what I did to get there, I'm going to walk you through right now, but it was nothing drastic. I don't want you to think over the 6 weeks I ran myself into the ground, I hated life. It was very straightforward, very simple. I'm going to show you how you can do it. Now, before I show you the exact steps I took, let's understand how you get faster fat loss, okay? Because I dropped 15 pounds roughly over 6 weeks. So that was like a 2 to 3 pound a week drop. That's a pretty quick rate. Now, if you're on the ball, if you're very consistent, I still think it's realistic, it's doable. Everyone's going to be different. Everyone's going to be in a different scenario, so different rates of loss might look more realistic for different people. However, you have to understand how fast fat loss is achievable, how you actually get it. Because a lot of people think to achieve fast fat loss, you just have to completely remove your favorite foods, remove certain food groups, do stuff like water fasts, very extreme methods, and that's not the case. Here's how fast fat loss or different rates of fat loss are actually achieved. So we first and foremost have to understand that a calorie deficit is needed to drop body fat. A calorie deficit is taking in less calories than you are burning. So when you're burning more calories than you're taking in, you're in a deficit. Your body will then go to body fat to get energy that it needs because it's in an energy deficit. Once you're in an energy deficit and you want to speed up the rate of loss, the bigger the size deficit, the faster the rate of loss. So now we're taking in even less calories than we're expending. Our rate of loss and fat loss would be quicker. If we wanted to speed it up again, we would need to create an even bigger deficit, meaning even less food in, even more output. The bigger the deficit, the faster the rate of loss. That is how you speed up your fat loss or set the rate of fat loss that you're after. Now, looking at that, you're probably thinking, well, Matt, the amount of food we were taking in was tiny, the amount of output we were doing was huge. And this is when setting realistic targets, playing around with what you're doing in terms of food intake and expenditure, which we're going to talk about now, is really important because you have to set yourself realistic targets, okay? You have to set yourself realistic expectations because if you can't stick to the amount of food you take in, the amount of output that you're doing, this rate of loss, no matter how fast it is, isn't going to last. You're not going to be able to do it for 6 weeks or for 12 weeks or however long you need to do it. Now I'm going to walk you through the different targets you might need to set yourself, how you can control these things, how I went about it. Let's start with food intake. Like I said, a lot of people think they have to remove their favorite foods completely or they have to completely remove food groups. That's not the case. We know that we just need to take in less calories than we're expending to create this deficit. And we might have to take in less calories and do more expenditure if we want to increase the size of that deficit. So how did I go about it? I didn't even track calories, right? However, it's important to understand and to know that I have tracked calories for many years in the past, which means I have a pretty good understanding of portion sizes, how many calories are in certain portion sizes, certain foods. I have a decent educational understanding of food, which does massively help. What I did was really straightforward, really simple. I set myself a feeding frequency. I had 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and 1 snack on an evening. I didn't eat in between these times. So there was no food intake consumed other than in the 3 meals and the 1 snack. Now this does 2 things. One, this is immediately going to bring my intake down, okay? Because before this, I was lightly snacking here and there. So if I just kept to my 3 meals, 1 snack, that was going to bring my food intake down straight away. Secondly, it makes it very consistent. If I'm eating the same amount of meal frequency, plus, which I also did, was try to have the same portion sizes within each meal. So for example, the portion sizes of my protein, my carbs, any fats that I had, I always tried to keep them very similar meal to meal. What that then meant was consistently I was eating relatively the same amount of food day to day, meal to meal, week to week. Now that's important because if over the first couple of weeks or as time goes on, you're not getting the rate of loss that you want, or your rate of loss slows down, whatever, you need to be able to make little adjustments to then try and get that rate of loss that you're after. So for example, if having the same meal frequency, having the same portion sizes, I wasn't getting the rate of loss I was after, I could just very easily and simply say, okay, in my breakfast, I'm going to reduce the portion size of my carbs by half or something, as an example. Or if I have one meal with a lot of fats, I'm maybe going to say, in this meal, I'm going to reduce my fats by half, whatever it might be. But it allows me to make very easy adjustments that are then consistent to change the rate of loss that I'm getting to basically progress my fat loss. The issue people have is when things aren't consistent, so maybe one day they're having 3 meals, maybe the next day they're having 3 meals, but also having 2 snacks. It's very hard to manage and to know exactly, the size of the deficit that you're in or what sort of progress you're going to be making. We want, in a perfect world, for calories to be very, very consistent. Now that's not going to happen. Obviously, they're going to be up and down a little bit. But the more variance we have with this, the more up and down they are. That is less consistency, and it is just going to make it harder to make consistent progress. Okay, so if you're looking for consistent progress, and if you're wanting to get relatively fast results, you're going to have to be consistent. The amount of food you take in needs to be consistent with that. Other than that, all I did was in every feeding window, including the snack, I made sure I had some sort of protein source, a decent size, and I had some sort of veg and or fruit serving, a minimum of 1. What that did is it meant that my protein intake was adequate across the day. High protein means staying full for longer and retaining muscle mass. And it meant that my volume of food was high, okay? And I had a lot of fiber in my meals. High volume, high fiber means better hunger management. If you're going for faster rates of loss, okay, or just in fat loss in general, hunger will creep in. You will be hungry. It's part and parcel of it. You can't avoid that. But what you can do is you can try and stay as full for as long, or try and manage that hunger as best as possible. And that's going to make it easier for you to keep your calorie intake consistent. If you're not as hungry, you're not going to want to eat as much. So protein, veg, fruit, high fibrous, high volume foods. As an example, you can find other alternatives to foods that are maybe higher in volume. So for example, instead of having normal pasta, I would have a lot of red lentil pasta when I was trying to drop body fat. 1, because it's actually a lot higher in protein, so it helps bump up my protein. But 2, for the same amount of weight, you get a little bit more volume. So what I mean by that is, for the same amount of weight, I would actually have a little bit more pasta on my plate, just because red lentil pasta has a bit more volume. So it almost feels like I'm actually eating a little bit more for the same amount of calories. But honestly, most of my meals, half of that meal was either fruit and or veg. And that's all I did for food intake. Moving on from food intake, we're going to go into expenditure, and that's why I've got a pair of smelly shoes. Expenditure, most people think about immediately exercise, training. That's not where I want you to start. I want you to start with daily activity. So think of this like non-exercise. So this might just be going for a walk, getting steps in, trying to stand more than sit, stuff like that. The reason being is because in terms of your daily expenditure, daily activity, non-exercise activity, actually equates to more of your daily expenditure than planned exercise does. Daily activity is about 15 to 20%, planned exercise is like 5 to 10. Make this real simple because it does not need to be difficult. Set yourself a step target, that's it. If you want in faster rates of loss, you're probably going to have to go a little bit higher, because remember, to get faster rates of loss, the deficit needs to be bigger. So our intake needs to be a bit lower and our output needs to be a bit higher. I would look at what your steps are right now. So let's say, for example, Well, take me for example, when I did it, my steps were roughly about 5,000 to 6,000. So what I did is I said, okay, I'm gonna hit 8,000 steps minimum every single day. And that was minimum. So there were some days where if I could, I would go and do more. So I jumped up my steps by 3,000 every single day as a minimum. So all of a sudden my daily expenditure was a lot higher. Again, it was realistic for me to 8,000. I just made sure that I was consistent, hitting that number minimum every single day. And then last but not least, the training side of it, the side everyone gets excited about. So as I mentioned, training only equates to 5 to 10% of your total daily expenditure. So I wouldn't actually focus on your training in terms of burning more calories. Instead, I would focus on your training just for retaining muscle mass and just generally getting fitter. So what I did was I set myself 3 weight training sessions a week. So I did 3 full body weight training sessions, and then I did 1 cardio session of about 30 minutes. That is it. My weight training sessions took about 45 minutes to an hour, cardio 30 minutes. I wasn't training 5, 6, 7 times a week. I wasn't killing myself in the gym. Remember, realistic targets. A few things to know on training. When it comes to weight training, the biggest thing I would focus on is just quality. So how good the training is, and intensity, okay? So you want to train hard. The main reason is training intensity and quality are going to lead to your body having a better chance of retaining or building muscle. So again, don't go in the gym. Don't think you need to spend 2 hours, 3 hours in the gym. You can get a very good quality session done in 45 minutes, an hour, if you're training with high intensity. So feel like you've only got 1 to 2 reps left in the tank. Then when it comes to cardio I put in mainly for fitness, but also to help bump up my expenditure a little bit. Remember, again, the amount of calories you're going to burn through cardio in regards to fat loss is not going to be huge. So I wouldn't go out and drive yourself into the ground doing loads and loads of cardio. However, if you do need to bump up your expenditure a little bit, it might be worth doing that through cardio, a touch, rather than trying to do more and more volume in the gym, okay? Because you always want to make sure that your volume in the gym is good quality. If you just try and do more and more and more, this might backfire, the quality might dip, you might not get that similar response that you're after. The last and most important thing, which I've touched on a little bit, but I'll touch on it again because it's so important. None of this matters if you cannot be consistent and stick to it. Doesn't matter how fast your fat loss is, doesn't matter what you're doing in terms of food intake, training, daily activity. If you can't stick to it, it does not matter. So set yourself realistic targets first and foremost. Then, if you're wanting to increase the rate of your loss, get a bit more consistent or faster progress, then maybe you can try and push things a little bit. And on that note, when you do need to push things a little bit, if you're trying to increase the size of your deficit, as I've kind of gone through here, the main things I would focus on is food intake, reducing it, and daily activity, increasing it. Those are going to be your 2 main drivers for building and increasing the size of the deficit. Don't try and just go crazy on on training, on exercise, because chances are you might burn yourself out and it might just backfire. You can use exercise a little bit if you want to try and bump up expenditure, but I would just try and go as much as possible realistically through food and daily activity first. Once you can't really push those limits anymore, then I would look at exercise as a way to maybe increase the size of your deficit. Obviously, when I say push the limits in regards of food, don't completely drive yourself into the ground as well. You have to feel good. You have to be fueling yourself. If you just feel like absolute garbage, again, you're not going to be able to stick to it. You're not going to be consistent. So it doesn't matter anyway because it will not work. Now, hopefully that all made sense. If I lost you a little bit because there's a little bit of information there, I do have this all written down in my fat loss blueprint. It basically takes you through exactly what I've gone through in this video. So if you want that free fat loss blueprint, I'll put the link in the description below. If you did find this video helpful, please do drop me a like because it helps me. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. I'm going to try and I'm pushing for 1,000 subscribers. So it would mean a lot if you did. And I also put out helpful information as frequently as I can to help you with your fat loss and fitness. See you on the next one.